Bist du schon live?
Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, in wenigen Sekunden sollten wir anfangen. Also es wäre sehr schön, wenn Sie Ihre Plätze einnehmen würden. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all on our panel, on our side event on the Munich Security Conference 2025. Munich Security Conference, every Munich Security Conference a little bit different. Today also, something different on our panel. We are hosting panels since a long time because we are partner of the Munich Security Conference as a German Armed Forces Reservist Association. But today I'm not moderating the panel. So we have a wonderful moderator you will see later on. So I'm on the panel representing the reserve and all the reserve issues on behalf of our association. And so also this panel is something new, and that the Munich Security Conference is always bringing new issues up. We saw it in the last days. As many of the participants described in the last days, this Munich Security Conference is really special. I think each Munich Security Conference is special, and we saw very important security conferences in the past, in the 90s, in the last years, in the beginning of the 2000 years, and also, of course, when the war between Russia and Ukraine started. And so also this, again, is a very special Munich Security Conference. When it comes to the issue war in Ukraine, we will see that many comrades of Ukraine will come later on step by step. So please have a few seats for them. So they are very interested in what we are doing in Europe. Of course, everybody's interested in what we are doing in Europe. And that leads me to our panel today, because I promised not to speak longer than 2 minutes, because we want to have enough time for the panel, for the panelists, and for your questions, and also for the answer of your questions to your questions. So, Eastern Flank Hub, Germany's reserve forces at NATO's core. We talk about how can we develop and deliver host nation support, what role is reserve playing, how can we fulfill the tasks, the territorial war, including homeland security and territorial defense, can be done. So all these issues, we're not talking just about the reserve. We're talking, of course, when General Bodemann is on the panel, about the operational plan. We are so lucky to have wonderful panelists on the panel. All of them will be introduced very soon from our moderator. I want to say a warm thank you to all of you being here today, discussing with us today our topic, the questions, of course, to the German and international representatives here, but also building bridges, building ties, linking with each other to a task that we all have in Europe and transatlantic, that we have a task that we have to fulfill and where we have to see results. So this evening should also answer some questions and lead to results. We hope that we host a panel that interests you. So warm welcome from my side. Today, second thing that is new, we have a partner. We have a partner organization with honor. So you can see we have good ties to US. We're working together, we're exchanging us, and we're learning from each other. So for me, it's a big honor that we're working with honor together. And Ray Barkert is here. And Ray, you will say a little bit with honor and why we're working together today and in the future. Hopefully, the podium and the panel is yours. And I go to my share. Please.
Dankeschön. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. My name is Ray Barkert. I had the pleasure of serving in the United States Marine Corps, and my first deployment was to Bosnia and Herzegovina on a NATO mission, and I worked with members of the German Army and hold them in the highest regard. So it is a real pleasure to be in Munich for the Munich Security Council. With Honor is a nonprofit organization in the United States, and what we do is we fight polarization, the divides, the political divides in the U.S., which is really one of our greatest challenges, by helping to elect a next generation of U.S. military veterans who have served and take a pledge to serve with integrity, civility, and the courage to work across party lines. We've been around for 7 years. We've helped pass over 250 laws. First and foremost among those laws have been defending our alliances. We're roughly 50-50 between the political tribes, Republicans and Democrats, and we have over 50 members of Congress who we support, including some who are here today. We hosted a panel at MSC with 5 members of Congress, and we were thrilled to have some of our brave Ukrainian warfighters in from the front lines, thanks to the Viktor Pinchuk Foundation yesterday. The reason why I was introduced was because Benedikt Frank met myself and Ukrainian Member of Parliament Sasha Ustinova in Davos this year, and then previously at the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention in the United States. And he asked us to participate in MSC, and then we had the pleasure of meeting this fine organization. So we're delighted to be a partner, delighted to sponsor, and we wish you all the best. And I want to just pass the mic one moment to Sasha Ustinova, who is the critical conduit for Ukraine to the U.S. Congress. She's a member of Parliament and has hosted us on 3 bipartisan delegations to Ukraine, where we've gone out to Kharkiv, to Kherson, and seen the front lines up close and personal. Sasha.
Thank you so much. I will not take long. My name is Alexandra Sasha Ustinova. I'm a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, and now I'm also chairing the Commission on Arms Control. If somebody told me 3 years ago I would know a difference between an Abrams and a Leopard tank, or, I don't know, a Grey Eagle and a Reaper, I would be laughing. I had to learn fast when the war broke. I was 9 months pregnant, and I was in the States, and I had to lobby for the weapons for us. So the life has changed for us, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank Germany, first of all, because every time I go to the States, the first question I get is, where are the Europeans? And I'm honestly telling them that they stood up and they're sending us much more weapons than even the United States does. And when I'm telling them we have 4 Patriot defense systems in Ukraine, air defense systems, 3 came from Germany, I'm so sorry, and 1 from the Netherlands. We have 5 times more tanks, Leopard tanks, than we have the Abrams. And when Germany took that commitment, and we are grateful for that, we know we have our back covered. And I just want to thank everyone sitting here, because I know this is your stuff, and you are sometimes sitting empty there, understanding that you gave up us almost everything you had, and it's also your tax money that is going there to support Ukraine. We will not give up. There will be a common victory. But I just wanted to take this moment to thank everyone here in this room for supporting us and standing there with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these opening remarks, and I'm delighted to be hosting this panel today. Maybe I'm going to do a quick personal introduction. I'm Carrie Hoppe. I'm a lieutenant in the reserves in the German Air Force. I'm obviously a proud member of the Reservists Association, and I'm delighted to be hosting this panel today for you, Eastern Flank Hub, Germany's reserve forces at NATO's core. We have a lot of pressing issues that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm very grateful that we have this amazing panel with us today. I'm going to start here at the right-hand side with Lieutenant General André Bodemann, Commander of the Territorial Tasks Command. Thank you for being here. Then we have a person who I think a large number of the audience will know, Patrick Sensburg, Colonel of the Reserves, obviously the President of the Reservists Association. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a panelist this time and not hosting. We're delighted to hear you speak.
Thank you.
And then we have Markus Faber, member of the German Parliament since 2017 for the Liberal Party and chairman of the Defense Committee. Thank you for being here as well and taking the time. And then our international addition to this panel, Jeffrey Rathke, the president of the American German. I learned the proper is American German, not German American. I always thought it was German American, actually. American German Institute at the Johns Hopkins University in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us today. Now, I'm going to direct the first question to you, Jeffrey Rathke, and I'm going to start with something pretty obvious. I think we've heard a lot of news. We've heard the start of the peace negotiations between Trump and Putin regarding the Russian invasion in Ukraine, which has taken European leaders by surprise. We've heard J.D. Vance's remarks at the Munich Security Conference just 2 days ago. So there's a lot of questions being raised about the future of the transatlantic relationship. And I know this is a large question, but I'd just like to start what kind of policy change you expect in the coming years coming from this new U.S. administration in regard to the transatlantic relationship and specifically NATO.
Right. Well, thank you, Carrie. It's an honor to be on this panel with such distinguished colleagues and in front of such a large audience. As you said, we've all been paying attention, not just in the last few days here in Munich, but since the election and since the inauguration of Donald Trump for a second term. I'm not a government official anymore. I used to work as an American diplomat, but that's a few years in the past. So I can't say that I can tell you exactly what the policy of the Trump administration is. I'm not quite sure they can right now either. And I don't mean that to be sort of deprecating them. They are early in an administration. There's always some confusion as you formulate the main lines of your policy in international affairs. Now, the question is whether the confusion is a bit, in some ways, a byproduct or whether it is the intention. And if you look at the statements from senior U.S. officials over the last week, you can take different conclusions from it. There were statements by President Trump the day he talked to Vladimir Putin. He said something a bit different the next day. Secretary of Defense Hegseth spoke in Brussels in a couple of different meetings and said slightly different things. And then Vice President Vance was here yesterday and said next to nothing about security policy and the American interest. So I think what I take away from that is they haven't made up their mind yet exactly what specific steps they're going to take. But I think at the same time, you have to be honest and recognize that U.S. policy is changing. And that will mean sooner or later diminished American military engagement in Europe. How soon that happens, we can't tell, but I think people should always plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I think you can also be aware that the U.S., for 7 decades, there is, even in the worst of times in transatlantic relations, there has been a fundamental assumption that, we're part of the same family, we're on the same team, that we have a fundamental bond, and that disagreements happen within that space. I think there's reason to wonder, at least, even if you don't know, whether that will continue to motivate this government and how the United States policy will develop. So what does that mean? I think that means that Europeans and Germans should focus on what they can do, what is within their control. There's sometimes, I think, a sense of helplessness, as the president said yesterday in his remarks, being a deer in the headlights. I think it is important to focus on what one can do in the short, medium, and long term, because Germany and its allies need to focus on their security needs and not only on the expectations from the United States.
Thank you so much. Before I start heading or turning my questions towards the rest of the panel, I'd just like to make a brief comment to our online audience, which is watching as well. You're able to type in questions through Slido, through the tool. So I'm not the only one who's going to be asking questions today. We're going to have online questions as well. And at the end, we'll also have the opportunity to ask questions from our live audience here. Now, to everyone else, we've all seen one Trump administration already. Now we've heard these remarks. What are your expectations, and have you been surprised by the remarks of the last days, and what kind of conclusions do you draw in terms of your field of competence and expertise? Maybe I'll start with you here.
I can make it brief because our chair of the Defense Committee, I think, has a lot of impressions. But I was not, let me say, I expected something like that. I didn't expect the language. I didn't expect the words that are said. But I expect, of course, and I can understand it a little bit, that from the US side, we are called to do our part of the burden sharing. I can't expect that US is coming all the time, helping us, supporting us, bringing us in the right path, on the right path. So I can understand that we should now do our part of the burden sharing, and it was Obama already who said it, who said, this is your area, you have to do your job, and where are you going? Tell us. So, and we didn't hear that enough, we didn't draw the conclusions out of that, so we were not prepared. We had many, many steps where we knew that everything is changing, and in the end, it don't have to be that everything is changing. In the end, I think we can rely on the partnership when we also fulfill our part of the partnership. And I wouldn't have reacted on the speech like some German politicians did, like this is inappropriate and things like that. I would say we can do much more. We can take our burden sharing. Yes, we'll do it. And I think from the US side, the US is, they don't solve or release the ties that are there since a long time. I think we need each other, not just in Europe. We need each other also in other areas of the world. It's not possible to fight for values when we're not together. And I just want to remember, we are around about 500 million Europeans in the EU and 300 million US citizens, if I'm not wrong. So I think this is a good combination, and it shows a little bit the dimensions. So together we are strong, not together we're a little bit more than 3 cities in China.
Now, Markus Faber, as a member of parliament and also chairman of the Defense Committee, what's your perspective? What has surprised you? What are the conclusions that you draw for your work?
I think the whole issue was not surprising. A lot of, maybe not a lot, but some German ministers have been in the US last year and supporting the Democratic Party. I think this was not a good move. It's just not polite to interfere in a foreign election. For instance, Hubertus Heil, Annalena Baerbock did this way. This was not good. So something like retaliation, I expected something like this, but not at this stage here. The Munich Security Conference is just another issue. It's the wrong place. So if you write an essay like that, you just miss the topic. So I did that once when in my German class, so I know what mark you get about that. So don't miss the topic. I think Vance missed the topic. So this is about security, this is about common defense, and he has not talked about that. The current US administration is supporting the far-right party in Germany. As I am from Eastern Germany, that's very funny to me. Having a pro-Russian far-right party supported by, that it means to be for the small working-class people, supported by the American government and some billionaires over there. It's very funny to me. We'll see how this works out in a week. But this was just the whole arena was the wrong one over here.
General Bodemann, what would you like to add? What's your perspective?
Please allow me first to welcome our Ukrainian friends personally as well. I'm deeply impressed about your braveness, and with your braveness you defend not only your country, you defend ours, you defend our values, you defend democracy and freedom. Thanks a lot. So not talking about the different understanding of democracy, let's come back to security policy. And it's very clear that we heard these words from the US side, these expectations that Europe has to do more for Europe defending, and that Germany within Europe has to do more. That was in the past the same expectation. It's still the expectation. Now we're listening to words in a different language, so to speak. But we have to fulfill now these expectations, and not... We have to listen, and we have to now to do something, and not to talk about it. So it's not surprising what we've heard in the past.
Okay, so the consensus, I think, is pretty clear. We have to take our European resilience into our own hands and really take responsibility for it, and improve our European defense sovereignty, and also improve Europe's role within NATO. And Markus Faber, if I can return to you, how has Europe's role within NATO shifted now that we also have Finland and Sweden in NATO? How has that geopolitical shift changed Europe's role within NATO?
There's a shift, especially in the Baltic Sea. I've been to Finland 2 years ago before they joined, and Sweden is also a big add-on when it comes to security on maritime issues in the Baltic Sea. And it's also a sign to Russia that when you are taking NATO, NATO is just getting stronger. So they basically added 1,344 kilometers on the Russian-NATO border, and the Finns are very happy right now because they see the barracks on the other side are very empty. That's a good thing. But if it comes to shifting balances over here, we also have to be aware of Ukraine. As Ukraine is very, very, very successful in defending itself against the Russian aggression, and it has the potential to stay that way, to stay a country that has a big military exposure, big military capability, and is able to be kind of even if they're not joining NATO this year or the next year, to be some kind of something that threatens Russia, maybe. So there will the aggression of Russia on Estonia will be less probable because Ukraine is there and Ukraine is prepared to defend itself.
Now, maybe General Budemann, maybe you can add like a dedicated military perspective. How has that geopolitical shift changed Germany's role within NATO as well?
The operations plan in Germany is not only out of the current security situation, it's out of the expectations from NATO and within NATO from the US side, because our geostrategic position in Europe is in the heart of Europe, and that means in case of deterrence or even defense at the eastern flank, we have to ensure that we can deploy the main bulk of the Allied forces to the eastern flank. And from me, and now we're talking about the reservists, for me it's very clear, this is expectation one, that we ensure the deployment in time and combat ready. And secondly, that the main bulk of our active forces will be at the eastern flank or on the way to the eastern flank. For me, that means I need a strong support from the civilian side with a maximum civilian support, and we need the system of reservists, because there will no active troop here in Germany. And the guarding the defense critical infrastructure will have to be done by our homeland defense forces. And therefore, we build up at least 6 regiments, we build up a division, and this is not enough. That's very clear. And I already briefed my shots that we need much more, but I will not mention a number. This will derive out of the number of the defense critical infrastructure. Then we have to look up how many capabilities and forces we need. And at the end, we have a number of battalions, companies, regiments, or whatever. So it's out, not only out of the security policy system, it's out of what is expected by NATO, and this is the deployment, and this is defending our country.
Now we're talking about the operations plan Germany. I mean, it took us until 2022 to really develop scenarios and to really get ourselves familiar with our threats. And I'm wondering, maybe I'll start with the American perspective on this before I ask the Germans on this panel why it took us so long. But what's your perspective? Why did it take us until 2022 to wake up? And why didn't we realize this in 2014? What's your outside perspective on this?
Well, I would prefer, instead of judging, I think it's clear that while Germany has done a lot in the last 3 years, especially, and a fair amount since 2014. I think it is, rather than assessing the reasons for the shortcomings up to now, it is much more important to focus on the tasks ahead, because there is a deteriorating security situation in Europe. Just in the last week, you have the prospect of declining American support or an American political initiative through President Trump to settle the war on some terms that are unclear. And, you know, I recall statements from the Minister of Defense here in Germany that the Bundeswehr needed to be ready in 5 or 6 years for a military aggression against a NATO member state. If the war is settled on terms unfavorable to Ukraine in the near term, I think that timeline is completely obsolete. And you're talking about a much shorter period of time. I can't put a number of months on it, but you know, you have a Russian army that is still growing. that is spending enormous amounts of money. Russia is spending more in terms of purchasing power parity than all of Europe combined. They are producing equipment at a faster rate than Europe. So it's important to focus on the things that are necessary now to be prepared for a much more urgent challenge than the terms under which Germany has been operating up to now. And if I could add one last thought, in 2014, after the first Russian aggression against Ukraine, there were conclusions drawn and important decisions made by NATO and its member states. And those became the benchmark, and that benchmark, 2% of GDP spent on defense, 20% of defense spending on investment in major equipment, those became obsolete already in 2022. But they still shaped for another 3 years, almost, the debate in Germany about what is enough in equipping and resources for the armed forces. When 2% was no longer relevant, in my view, that was still the discussion that everyone was having, even until a few days ago, frankly, if I look at some statements from some party leaders in Germany. And so I think there is a need for an accelerated adjustment to a new reality where 2% and these other difficult things are no longer sufficient.
Now, Patrick Sandsberg, you were a member of parliament in 2014, so you were obviously very, very close to the debate that we had at that point. What makes you optimistic about the kind of debate we're having now in comparison to 2014? And do you think, now specifically looking at your position as a president of the reservists associations, that we're making the right decisions and drawing the right conclusions?
What makes me optimistic is that we are learning. I think one of the core learnings from the Ukraine war is that territorial defense, that defending your country or the alliance means a task. It's a task for the whole society. It's not just a task for the military, it's a task for the whole society. That means the firemen and firewomen, the fire brigades, all other organizations, we call them blue light organizations. Of course, for the regular army, but also for reservists. So it's a task for the whole society, for the whole country. We are learning that with the operational plan right now. It's not that we had nothing before. We had guidelines for civil and military cooperation in defense and things like that. But now we understand it's a task for the whole society, and we will see that we have a discussion about conscription again in the next legislative period. We understand what we have to do to be ready. We are on the path, and we're not just we in Germany. If you see other countries in the European Union, in Europe, they all didn't spend enough money for the defense budget. They all shrink the military. And now we understand that we have to invest in having security and peace. It's not coming by itself. But we are on the way, and we're doing it not slow. We're doing it step by step. And we are not so bad, as is always said. If you compare sizes, if we compare many, many things, it's not quite clear that we are running far behind. But we have to do much more. That is clear, and we have to do it together. That's my point of view. We can't do it alone. We have to do it together, and we have to do it now very quick. I underline this. We don't have time, and we're not able to write it somewhere in a book on a sign. That makes us weaker. We have to do it now.
Now, before I want to get into the specific role of the reserve in Homeland Security and also in the operations plan, I want to talk about an issue that I feel is not really represented enough, and that's the role of, obviously, Germany. We're in the middle of Europe. We have a very, very important geopolitical or geographical position, because if anything happens in the east, all the troops, all the material, everything, all the tanks has to move through Germany. And we need infrastructure that can support that. And I think everybody who's German in this audience knows we've had debates on crippling bridges and streets in Germany. Now, how is the role of infrastructure and having modern, safe, stable infrastructure represented in the operations plan? General. Yes, okay. Sorry, I just looked at you, didn't mention your name. I apologize.
That's a question for me. I think we have a quite good infrastructure and traffic infrastructure in Germany, but the question is infrastructure resilient enough to fulfill our tasks? That's number one. Number two is it's not only a question of military needs. Because if we invest, and I'm now outside of my responsibilities, to be very honest, if we invest in our infrastructure, traffic infrastructure, it's good. It's for the sake for our people to better come from A to B. Secondly, for Germany as an economic power, and thirdly, to deploy our forces in time and combat ready to the eastern flank. So win-win-win situation, so to speak. And out of the operations plan in Germany, we identified the main routes and what we need within that main routes to bring the forces to the eastern flank, bridges, tunnels, the railway system, so all means of transport. And there is a plan A, and plan A is always good, but everybody knows with the first bullet, plan A is done because Russia will do everything to undermine this plan, to hamper this plan, and we have to have at least a plan B, C, or D, or whatever alternatives. And therefore we need much more resilient traffic infrastructure than mentioned in the plan A. And that's we're working out now with our federal states, with the mayors and so forth. So we come down not from the theoretical level and really the practical level what we do need. And it's currently being worked out.
I think we're going to head into the topics of homeland security. I'm seeing the questions are popping up here. And I'm gonna stay with you, General Bodemann. Do you believe that Germany's homeland security right now is capable of fulfilling the task assigned to it? And then I think we're going to switch over to you and ask how the reserve can assist to help in this issue.
Okay, first of all, I think we had a good start. Building up 6 regiments with 65-67% fulfillment in the posts. Do we have enough material? No. Do we have enough homeland security forces? No. But what we started, and we build up this derived from the needs from the operations plan Germany. But what I see is highly motivated people. I saw the 19-year-old to the 59-year-old who refused conscription in the past and say, security situation changed and I will do now something for my daughter and for this country. And okay, he's not as fit as the 19 years old, but he is so motivated to do his job as a rifleman in the Homeland Defense Forces. And we saw it in the exercise last year. So I'm really very optimistic that we get the right people and that we get the right amount of people. Because if we offer the Homeland Defense Forces nationwide, the more we get people into that system. And that's another story, to be faster, to be less bureaucratic, to get them into the system and that to do their jobs. They would like to do their job with weapons, with all the things they need. And I'm very optimistic that we get these forces coming ready in a couple of years.
Now, I've seen you nod vigorously, and now I'm eager to hear what's the reserve's role in supporting Homeland Security, and what's your view on that?
I think, first of all, we shouldn't underestimate the German military. We have very, very, very high motivated, highly trained, active soldiers. We're good in the international missions. We're good in the different functions, so everywhere. And we have a very high standard. And the same for the reserve. We shouldn't underestimate what's happening there. We don't have the numbers yet. We don't have the numbers that comes from the past, but we are doing everything to build, as General Bodemann said, the homeland regiments. We're going to 6. Our target is maybe 12 in the future. We have the division. I think we will organize them geographically where they are needed in Germany. I think we're doing the tasks, and we knew from the past a lot of things that we can reinvent in the years 2025 and following. We're not coming from nothing, and we shouldn't be underestimated. But on the other side, we have to see we never will reach, from my point of view, a situation when we're done with work. Also, the general defense plan was not a general defense plan, what was steady then for decades. It was a continuously planning, renewing and updating it. So it will be fluent, it will be changing, and we have to understand that we have to grow, that we every day have to learn more tasks, new learnings also from our comrades from the Ukraine, and we have to invent and develop new possibilities to defend. So we'll never come to a point when it's done, but the level of ambition, that has to be increased very, very fast. But if the question, I understand it right, if we have to do our task tomorrow, we will do it. We will do it, and excellent. So nobody should think we're easy to get. No, definitely not.
Now, Markus Faber, I'm going to ask you a question which I admit is going to be a little bit biased because I am a reservist. We're here at the Reservist Association. But do you think the reserves are given the political priority and attention that they deserve and that they need to fulfill their job?
Absolutely not, no.
And what's your key priorities when it comes to the reserves?
So getting some attention to it and underlying the efficiency and the necessity for the reserves. I think it was this week when we had a discussion. The Minister of Defense was speaking of 460,000 German troops all day long. And this year, the Bavarian party, the CSU, came up with 500,000 soldiers and said, "Oh, this is an innovation. We are so crazy." Basically, they are not. What the public is not getting is that you have 200 soldiers and then you have 300,000 whatever reserves. And the question is, these are reserves. They are not active soldiers, but how can you train them? How well prepared are they for the jobs they have to do? And this is something that's completely out of the question in media right now. Are they doing rifle training once a year or once a month? Are they going to the forest and try to survive under difficult circumstances in the forest or not? And basically the answer now is not. Finland is doing a lot in this respect, and I think we can learn a lot from Finland in this issue. But it's completely out of the question. Not many people in the German Bundestag are discussing it. There's no German newspaper talking about it. So the answer to your question is no.
Now, I'd like to get an American perspective on this because I don't know if our audience, and I personally am not aware of generally how the reserves in the U.S. function and work, and maybe can you give us some advice with an American perspective what we could do to strengthen our reserves?
Well, I wish I could say I'm an expert on the reserve system in the United States, but I'm not. So I think we may have some. So we have the defense attaché or someone from the defense attaché's office here. So perhaps in the question session or afterwards, he could provide some perspective on that. But what I think is important to keep in mind, the force strength of the Bundeswehr now is around 183,000 or so. The target of 203,000 is, well, there is not progress to meeting that. I would argue that the risks of war in Europe today are greater than they were a week ago, without affixing a percentage term to that. But I think that is an incontrovertible conclusion of what is happening. And so I think there is a need very quickly to assess how to get on a path to active forces as well as reserve forces that can meet the more urgent potential risks of a conflict. And I think reserves need to be part of that because if you look at the European forces lack mass, and there are only a couple of ways to acquire that, and you need to make absolute optimum use of people who are experienced and trained and available in the society, and not just people on active duty.
So now we're about to head into the open questions from the audience, but I'd like to close with one, to be fair, almost impossible question as a closing statement from our panelists. We have German elections coming up in 1 week. We have a new administration. There's a lot of pressing issues. I think the last week has shown that and intensified that. If you had to name a key priority, what would that priority be? And I'm going to start with you.
Mass. We already heard it from a lot of statements. We heard it from analysis, from think tanks. Mass matters. Mass matters in territorial defense. I would first invest in mass of ammunition, mass of not so expensive weapons, and in changing our law into getting back into conscription, mass of soldiers. Sorry for combining these words, but it's a learning out of it. Without the stuff, without the people, it doesn't happen. You're not able to defend your country. Mass.
Resources. I think in the near term, I'm so pleased to have soldiers here from Ukraine. In the near term, Germany and its European partners need to react to the signals from the United States and urgently come up with options that can strengthen President Zelensky's position, including by having the prospect of replacing possibly diminished U.S. assistance, civilian as well as military. I think that is urgent. I was glad to hear today German politicians from a variety of parties talking about the urgency of doing that, in perhaps even before the next government is formed. And I think that is extremely important. And then in the medium term, resources for the Bundeswehr. But I think there's a sequencing issue there that the Bundestag will face after the election.
Markus Faber, your parliamentary perspective?
So your question was what's lacking the most? My answer would be preparedness. We are very good at hoping for the best, so we should be prepared for the worst.
General Bodemann.
Not the same. Let me be more concrete with regard to the operations plans in Germany. This is first missile defense, and secondly anti-UAV, because the development of drones, UAV, is so fast. We have to buy from the shelf first, knowing that in 2 years' time these systems are old and overrun.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to look into the audience and see if there are any unanswered questions that we can address today with this wonderful panel.
Yeah, not everybody at the same time.
So, thank you all for your panel. My name is Bernhard Baumann. In the midst of the 1980s, the German armed forces created troops, non-active troops, for the so-called wartime host nation support. These troops, nearly all of them were reservists, were tasked to support the incoming American troops, nearly 6 divisions in 10 days, and bring them to the forward combat zone. So my question is, General, who will do this job now? Is it purely the civil side of our economy? Will there be tasks on the reservists, or who will do this job? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Directly? Answer?
Directly,
okay. Yeah. It's a mix. It's a mix by active forces left and not having gone to the eastern flank. First. Secondly, as I said, we need our reserve forces to do that job as well, partially. And thirdly, we have maximum support of the civilian side by contractors, but by our organizations with and without security issues as well. It's a mixture.
Thank you. Jonas Segerstad, Swedish Defence Attaché in Berlin. Question, probably most to you, General, perhaps also to you, Patrick. What legal issues do you still have to get over with? We also woken up after peace dividend and had, luckily, a lot of wartime laws left in Sweden that we could kind of rejuvenate. But what would you think are the most legal things that you should take care of to be able to continue, even if you have resources, even if you have the mass?
Soldiers, specifically generals, have to give a military advice, and then the politicians have to decide about that. So what I see is that we don't have anymore a difference between security within and outside of Germany. This is very unstable. And secondly, what we have to do is to prevent a war and to deter. But within our Rahmenrichtlinien zur Gesamtverteidigung, with our framework for total defense, we have that laws, but not coming to this point, not coming to the point that the parliament has to decide about the defense case. This legal framework will not work. And from my point of view, in the face of not being in war, not being in peacetime any longer, in between the hybrid phase, we need partially new legal frameworks to overcome these threats and to do our job in order to have real deterrence that works and prevents us from a war. So we have to give the politicians our military advice about to change the legal framework, and within the operations plan Germany we did.
I have a wish, because you addressed me also, and we have our chairman of the Defense Committee here. I know that you have another appointment later on, so I have the chance maybe to address something. First of all, I know that's a different political issue, conscription. From my point of view, we won't make it without conscription. Second point is, we're thinking about fixed structures, and we have, for example, now 6 homeland regiments. We have much more young people who want to serve, but we don't have the structure. We don't get them in the system because we don't have the structure. The clearance, because you don't have the clearance, you don't get them in the system. So we have so much issues that the people who want to serve don't get in the system. Why not getting them without a structure, pooling them? Why not waiting, training them, and get the clearance afterwards? We don't have the time to wait. So if we think in structures, in fixed boxes, we will never be so fast than we should be. That would be my wishes for the politics.
I can add to that. I think this is the one thing that left undone, because we had a snap election. We are running 7 months early. So the one debate that still is open is this about conscription. But you had 2 interesting points there. You said you are in favor of conscription, and you said there are too many people that are volunteering, so you can't take them all. So I think this is the both 2 points. Getting those who want to get to the armed forces because they are motivated already. Getting those first. And when you still have space, you can talk about something else. But we are not at that point yet. I think we should get those who want to volunteer first. Our defense minister has spoken, I think, for more than a year about it, has done nothing to it. But I think I would have expected this debate and this election campaign. Never happened. Never happened. I think it will be a debate for the next half a year. Whatever the election results are, it will be a debate. And I think we have to make sure conscription or any kind of compulsory something, if you want to just ask people a question and they have to send you back the answers, any kind of compulsory add-on, it has to be in the service of our security. The Conservative Party is talking about conscription for retirement homes. Let's be clear about it. It can be a good idea, it can be a bad idea. But if we are talking about the security of our nation, the security of 32 nations within NATO, it's not about retirement homes. Retirement homes are important, but that's not the issue over here. We have to talk about our armed forces, what they need, what they can do, and what is not helpful for our armed forces.
Now I see some questions over here.
Yes, I'm behind the column. I apologize for that. Maxim Butkevich, I'm a senior lieutenant of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and a former prisoner of war, spending 2 years and 4 months in Russian captivity. By the way, I was a platoon commander in my platoon while liberating Kiev region. Apart from Soviet-produced weapons, also used German RPG Panzerfaust. Thank you for that. Thanks a lot. I have two questions, and both are kind of wider ones. One is, it's been mentioned during the discussion that the production speed when it comes to weaponry in Europe, comparing to production speed of weaponry by the Russian Federation, is currently it's incomparable. Do you see the possibility for European industry to really increase arms production speed? Are there any incentives not used yet to have, for Europe, to have enough weapons to safeguard itself against possible Russian attack? And the second, which might sound a bit abstract and speculative, but for Ukrainians it is a very concrete one. We are able to defend ourselves for 3 years, specifically because society is mobilized in a way unseen before, donations and volunteering and everything. Do you think that German society, when it comes to moral, is ready to take up arms? I mean, German civilians to wear uniform and to defend itself against Russian aggression. Thank you.
Maybe if nobody...
I would like to go for that one. For the second question, at least. Maybe also for the first. For the second question, I think when I've been asked a lot during the last 2 days, what should happen that we take security, defense seriously? Does it need political leadership, which was missing by our chancellor, 8 days left, and also our foreign minister, who's talked more about a feminist approach to foreign affairs. So we lack political leadership. Will this be enough? I'm not sure. I think it would be, political leadership will be enough for the defense politics in the US. I'm not sure if it will be enough over here. But so what does it take to take the defense seriously? I think a serious threat that is perceived by the German people. I have been in a demonstration here in Munich today where hundreds of Ukrainians and also German citizens protest for more support for Ukraine. Those people have understood the issue. While I was there for an hour or so, thousands walked by on a sunny day in Munich, having a nice day. Those people maybe did not understand yet. So what has to happen? I think when this threat gets more real, the perception of the necessity to defend your own country also gets more real. I hope it will not take rockets to be dropped not on Kharkiv but on Munich to realize that the threat is real. By the way, we are preparing for it. Talking about rockets, Arrow 3 will be working this year, and this is good news. So defense politics has done something right.
Jeffrey Rathke, I saw you wanted to respond.
Thanks. So on the question of, pardon me, I lost my thought there for a second. I was distracted by Arrow 3 because I have an opinion about Arrow 3, but that's not. Well, maybe separately. So, well, let me pause and get my thought back, and I'll come back to it. Yeah.
Maybe in the meantime, because I know you have to go, I want to ask one last question to you regarding defense innovation, because we've seen how the battlefield has evolved. In Ukraine, we've had the scenario that a $200 million warship was sunk by an $80,000 underwater drone. So we're seeing how the battlefield has evolved through innovation. Do you think that we as Europeans, we as Germans, are doing enough to keep up with that innovation?
Absolutely not. And I think also the European politics are not looking at the issue. I'm going to Ukraine every half a year, so I've talked to the head of the Ukrainian Navy about those naval drones, actually. But I've also been at Kramatorsk, Kharkiv, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, talking to the people that are actually using the weapon system. And I've seen it evolve. And I don't learn from it enough while sitting in Berlin. I don't. I have to go there, and not just to Kiev, to some office, but talk to the people who are using the weaponry we are delivering, but also talking about the weaponry they are missing if it comes to UAV defense and stuff like that. So I'm doing that to learn. Who is doing that? Who is doing this in the German Bundestag? Is it 3 people or 5 out of 700? I'm not sure, but not enough. We have 38 members of the Defense Committee, and I think there has to be a learning curve, not just in the Defense Committee, also my colleague from the Foreign Affairs Committee is over here, Ulrich Lechte. You can come with me anytime. But also in the Defense Ministry as well. Some people are motivated, some people have understood the task, but most of them do business as usual, and it's not the time as usual. Unfortunately, I have to leave at that note because I have to be in another appointment in 2 minutes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time. Now,
well, I'm glad that I forgot my answer because it gave Markus Faber an opportunity to wrap up his thoughts before leaving. But this is a question, and we have other members of the Bundestag and people active in politics here. The thing that strikes me as an American, when I look at the levels of trust in Germany, in the country's institutions, is how much of a better state you are in than we are. It is unfortunate that over recent years, confidence in public institutions in the United States has declined. You are in a better situation than we are. And what I also observe is that on some of these big questions about public support for the really difficult measures in the nation's interest, in many cases, public opinion has been far ahead of the actions of either the German government or the German parliament. If you look at the support for increasing defense spending, there was majority support for spending 2% of GDP on defense at least 6 years ago. And it has taken this long to get to that stage. Now, it's of course difficult. It's not so simple. You don't snap your fingers and the money appears. But I think we are in times where political leadership may also meet with a great deal of understanding in the public. And I hope that is certainly the case.
Question in the front. Do we have a microphone? Oh, okay, it's coming. On its way.
Well, I'm the second politician in the room as MP, and I would like to know, Uli Lechte, foreign spokesperson of the Liberal Party, you made a speciality for me. You made an interview, Mr. General, on the Bayerischen Rundfunk, the Bavarian television, and you impressed one of the commanders sitting on my home couch. And he was like, what is he doing? What is he talking about? And that was something that gave awareness, and that's something we haven't talked about really. Where's awareness to bring to the people of Germany? They all had on television the pictures of Ukrainian war. I've been to Kiev in December. Markus Faber talked a little bad about me in this point, but I've been there. But I'm on the diplomatic side and not on the defense side, so it's another approach to all of that. But what could be the part of Reservistenkameradschaft and all of them to strengthen the awareness? So we have all our security conferences in Nuremberg, for example, where we are cooperating. We are doing so much as we can. But what was your intention when you made that interview? Because that was for an acting general. Amazing. That was something I've never seen on television by an acting general. The old ones sometimes are grumpy, but you were
maybe I
so
was close,
direct.
maybe I was close to my retirement, but no. But to answer your question, it starts all about to tell the people the truth. and telling the people the truth about the security situation and about the threats and what to do. And then it was not me going to the Bayerische Rundfunk to ask for an interview. And therefore something changed in society as well and in media, because they asked me. And I said, you are really tough to invite me to give such an interview. Are you sure? And he said, yes. And now at least we have 1.5 million clicks. That doesn't mean that 1.5 million people listened to that interview, but a lot of people were at least interested in that. And we have to do it. And I talked to some politicians about, it's your task to talk about that, about the needs, the truth, and what we need. But then they said to me, yeah, but if you do it as a military, it's better than I do it as a politician, because they will say you do it only because of political reasons or whatever. So I will do it, and I'm now allowed to do it. A couple of years ago, and now I would spend my time in the retirement.
Now I saw another question right here.
Капітан Королюк, Повітряні сили Збройних сил України.
My name is Captain Koroluk, and I am coming from Armed Forces of Ukraine, anti-air defense.
У нас в 22-му році Україна була абсолютно не готова до війни. Уряд не вірив в її початок. Народ був абсолютно не сприймав рівень загроз.
In 1922 and before, our nation was not ready for the war. The people, the government never believed the war was possible.
Збройні сили України не готувалися до війни з Росією.
And armed forces of Ukraine did not prepare for the war with Russia.
Не було жодної причини, що зробила Україна, щоб можна було виправдати агресію Росії.
Ukraine did not cause this aggression from Russia. There was no cause for this aggression.
Нашу відсутність підготовки до війни Росія сприйняла як нашу слабкість. В результаті ми отримали війну.
But Russia looked at our lack of preparedness as weakness, and we received this war because we were not prepared.
Ми отримали війну у вигляді великих колон, моторизованих колон і великої кількості особового складу, які в одну ніч увірвалися на територію нашої держави.
So overnight, from various directions, whole columns of tanks and other military equipment, armored vehicles, were just moving into Ukraine.
Все, що на той момент могла протиставити держава, це великий мобілізаційний ресурс людей, які взяли в руки зброю і сформували свій спротив в форматі територіальної оборони, і плюс героїчний спротив тих регулярних частин, які на той момент були розгорнуті.
And if you look at all the convoys of Russian military equipment coming from different directions, the only thing Ukraine could do to defend itself was fighting back by average citizens with whatever they had in their hands, and heroic resistance of very small but prepared armed forces.
І це змогло зупинити великі маси ворога, які вторглися.
And that could stop huge invasion of the enemy in mass.
На определеному етапі вони навіть відступили.
And at some stage they had to draw back.
На сьогоднішній момент це війна малих мобільних ударних груп, це війна прориву лінії фронту масованим застосуванням FPV-дронів і артилерії.
And now Russia fights in a different way. They have small mobile groups that attack in various directions in mass. They use artillery and heavy artillery and FPV drones.
Ми навчилися і вчимося з кожним днем через смерті стримувати і такі вже нові методи ведення війни ворога.
We are paying with deaths of our soldiers, but we are learning to fight back these new types of attacks.
Велика сім'я народів Європи – це більше, ніж 400 мільйонів населення.
And if we look at European family, this is more than 400 million population.
Ми зараз чуємо про готовність Збройних сил Німеччини, регулярних військ, мобілізаційного резерву щодо готовності протистояти у війні з Росією.
And today we are discussing how Germany is ready to fight back Russian invasion on its territory with regular forces and with reserve.
Але на прикладі України вже всі зрозуміли, що відповідний рівень підготовки росіянами сприймається виключно як слабкість. І це провокує, може бути провокацією до агресії.
But in Ukraine, we all understand that lack of preparation of society could be not the cause, but invitation for Russia to do the aggression.
Чи проводиться відповідна підготовка по взаємодії Збройних сил різних країн Європи до можливої дачі відсічі, можливої агресії Російської Федерації всіх 400 мільйонів великої Європи?
So is there a way that European armed forces of all European countries, of all 400 million people, can they unite together to fight back Russian aggression?
No, the question was, are they preparing for this? Not they can prepare, but are they working on preparation of their forces? Sorry, I just wanted to correct a bit of the station. The question was about, are either coordinating efforts between European armies to prepare to respond if there is such an attack from Russian side?
Thank you.
First of all, I think we have to, and we can learn a lot from you. And it's not only talking about the military side of the house to prepare ourselves. What you do in Ukraine is to provide a certain level of normality, which means you send your children at school, not under normal conditions, but under special conditions. Your supermarkets are open. The variety of offers is maybe less than before, but the shops are open, the shops will be filled, there's energy. Okay, you have to live a couple of hours without electricity, but then the company restores that, and this is exactly what we need as well. We have to prepare ourselves from the military side and from the civilian side to survive for a couple of hours without electricity, but to keep a certain standard of normality. And that's what we can learn from you. Because the Russians will exactly press us that we will not stand to be a couple of hours without electricity, water, whatever, and we will not be sending our children at school, but this is exactly what you do, and therefore we can learn a lot from your side.
Patrick Dansbrook, your
I just want to underline this. When we understand, I think, like you understood, that defense of their own country is a task for the whole society, then we take the learnings. When I was on the celebrations on the Maidan before the war, full war started, I saw, of course, your military marching on the Maidan. I saw the Air Force flying over the parade. Then, after the military, the police came. And then a lot of other people from the society came who are relevant for territorial defense. The people who work in the forest came, and I asked, why are the people working in the forests came? Because it's crucial for defending the old country, to know the country, to know what to do to stop troops. We had these ambitious too, when we call them Wallmeister, and I really don't know a translation for the word Wallmeister. These are the people who know the bridges and know exactly where a bridge has these special points where you could let them explode. So in the end, you understood very early in the time between 2014 and when the full war started, what you should do, and you should understand defending your own country as a task for the whole society, for everybody in the country. Everybody started to be prepared. We have to go that path too, that we just can be ready when the whole country is prepared. It starts with the mindset. We are a little bit far from it still. I always look to Austria when they have also in their plannings in the schools not the situation where young officers are not allowed to go into schools and to talk about the military. They have it in the plans that they want to be able to fight. They have the will to fight for the values of their own country. We have to talk about that we have to be ready to fight for the values of their own country. And it's much more, it includes the whole society. And if we start with that, if more and more people coming to the military because of conscription, if more and more people understand what military is doing, then more and more will come and understand that they're doing a very important task. And by the way, I hope the war in Ukraine is over soon, but with a victory of Ukraine and not a bad compromise. But if we get ready here, it will support Ukraine also, because there is a huge number of states who are behind you, and that is important. If we have nothing here, you're alone at the front line, so it's important for us also to deliver the weapons, to deliver the ammunition, but to be ready here as well. There are more. We are a family.
Now I'm going to take another look at the audience if there's any questions that are left. The question right there.
Yeah, thank you. So on a slightly different topic, but still on the overall arching topic of preparedness. So my observation from the lessons learned from the war in Ukraine is that the battlefield is getting more and more complex. All the domains of the battlefield are relevant at the lowest possible command structures. And I also see that there is a consistent need for standardization of training within all NATO members. And with this ongoing increase in complexity and this not completed effort for standardization, I wanted to ask the members in uniform on the panel, how do you think we need to rethink training and, yeah, basically the whole preparedness issue on the training side for armed forces?
Coming back to my statement before, that we can learn a lot from the Ukrainian side, fighting bravely and successfully. The only question is if this kind of war is a blueprint for future war. So we have to think about what comes next. And this will influence our training and our equipment and our organization as well. But it's a multi-domain operation, of course.
I would just speak for the reservists who are in a normal civil job, and for them it's not easy to do the training because they have a job. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a year is not easy to be in the military training. I would look at each issue that is not needed. Paperwork, all other things. We're wasting too much time with administrative things than concentrating on the important things that are needed to be able for combat. Second, I would start with the simple things, not too complicated. When we have more time than we heard today, we can start with the complex things. So in the end, I would concentrate on the main important things and go into higher numbers than to be concentrating on small numbers and having high ambitions then in the end, because scale is, for me, important, numbers is important, size is important. That would be my first approach.
More questions?
Some questions from Slido.
All right, then I'll take the newest one. When will the training capacities for military training actually be set up to also train unreserved persons? And maybe I can add some context to that question. We also have this Grundausbildung für Ungediente. I don't know the exact translation. So basic training for people who have not yet served. I personally know a lot of people in my closer social network who are incredibly interested in doing that and taking this 4-week course and becoming a reservist in Homeland Security. But there's very limited spaces, so maybe you can give us some insight of how that's evolving and how we're increasing capacity for that.
This is success. From my point of view, this is a success story, and we have to widen up the the amount of possibilities, opportunities to bring them into the system. And that's exactly what I mentioned before. This is not the 19 years old one, and this is a 59 years old one. A great variety of people with a great variety of background, and this is something we have to increase. Absolutely, a success story.
Let me add, on a European level or NATO level, from my point of view, we need minimum standards, like every reservist has a weapon too, and not pooling weapons, these kind of issues. In the end, that is possible for training, but it's not possible for deterrence. If you pool weapons, then of course Putin knows just a small percentage of the reservists will have a weapon in the end when it's needed. So we need full equipment, ammunition for 30 days, also for the reservists, because there's a second and third wave. So in the end, if you don't have that, it's not a deterrence. It's maybe a nice training, but not deterrence.
Now, there's another question that I wish I could have directed towards Markus Faber, because that's another legal, political question. But how can the German reservists hold a high level of training and readiness without a duty of the employers to let them go? Maybe some thoughts, although I think that the opinion is going to be pretty unison in this panel.
Yes, of course it's on our agenda, but it's not enough to say we make it mandatory now for the employer. Because then the employer will look who's a reservist and who's not, and will prefer the non-reservists when it comes to employment. So in the end, it has to do something, of course, with conscription about the whole system, just to say from tomorrow on, the employees who are reservists can go because it's mandatory. That would make it two different groups of employees in a firm, so it's a little bit more complex, and we talk about again of conscription and a whole of the people.
It's a clear decision by the government, and we don't want it in the military case right now. Nevertheless, we gave the military advice that on the way to roll out the operations plan Germany, we will come to the point where we need to bring in that forces on the mandatory case. So that's very clear. Not now, but at a point.
Now, will the combat troop reserve units also grow up quickly like Homeland Security, since we cannot do without a combat troop reserve in the Verteidigungsfall, in the case of an attack? I think it's a very broad question, but maybe we can take a look at that as well.
Therefore, we need our reserve system to enlarge our forces when it's necessary, and to replace the ones which are wounded, fallen. So it's not only Homeland Security. It's to replace the troops at the eastern flank or wherever they fight. And therefore we need this system, and we need that people, as easy as it is.
And additional more tasks, like who's carrying the wounded soldiers from the eastern flank backwards, who's handing over to whom prisoners of war, so who is doing that. There are many tasks that reservists have to do in the future, and so that's why we need so many reservists.
Now another question right here from the audience.
I think it's working. It is, okay. I actually have two questions. The first one is really short, is what we face, like with the United States, for example, their military is not willing to give up their, I would say, weapons stuff, because they want to keep like some certain level of their army ready. To what extent your military is willing to do that and give up? Because, again, I know with the Patriot defense systems, the numbers, and we are really grateful for that. And the second question is, you brought up the issue of training. The majority of the trainings we see now, and even that Ukrainians are going through, it's the small arms, if you go to the, if you're recruited to the army, or to a specific type of weapon, like, I don't know, the Leopard tanks, for example. When we look at the losses at the battlefield, the majority of the losses are from the drones and from the guided aviation bombs. Nobody is being trained on that. And are you adapting your trainings to, as we do, to the drone technology? Because right now, unfortunately, this is World War I in the trenches, just with the drones flying over your head. Thank you.
That's exactly what we see, and therefore I said already before that we need not only missile defense but anti-drone, anti-UAV systems. But we have to use drones and UAV as well. Because if we have less personnel available to fight, then we need technology. And this is sensors, this is artificial intelligence, that's drones, and so forth. And we have to do more. That's very clear, and that's a military advice to use it.
My question was whether you're training your own army for that, because will they be prepared to fight the war that we do, not just using the tanks?
To train our army means that we have to have that systems. And therefore we gave a military advice to get that systems. So we are not at the stage that you are using that systems every day, on an everyday level. So it was clear what we learned from you, that's the future. I don't talk often about game changers, but UAV are game changers.
Now, looking at the time, I think we're going to do one more question. I'm going to look into the audience. We have a question right here. Okay.
Hello everyone, my name is Alexei. I'm captain of the National Guard of Ukraine and I am in Seoul. I am very close to the reserve because I started my military career as an officer in the Territorial Defense Force of Ukraine and I joined it in 2022 in the February of 25th. And I have a very short remark about like UAVs and modern warfare, because everyone talking about UAVs and anti-UAVs, but we forget that in the front line, because my brigade is currently fighting in the Kharkiv region, we still use tanks, we still use artillery, we still use like just rifles. And anti-drones don't mean like big some air defense assets, but it also means some EW assets we can mount on our APC, our IFV, and I encourage you, don't forget this conventional like assets, and don't forget this conventional like machinery, because we've seen from the history when we like gave up and say that oh, it's like obsolete weapons, it's obsolete machinery, we wouldn't use it anymore, but then we can get it again and we will use it again. And I think it's very important, don't forget to be prepared to any war and to any circumstances, because I want to like share with you stories from our last operation that we conducted in the Kharkiv region. That one M113 APC, that was like vehicle that Americans don't believe it as I read it. They saved, rescued 13 of our soldiers from the close front, close fire, and it like holds, I think, 3 or 4 close shrapnel of an explosion of 152 millimeter, and one FPV hit. And I think this is like great examples that even with obsolete weapons we can use it and we can upgrade it, and it also and still will be a game changer, as you mentioned, sir, during the war. Thank you.
Whoever wants to start, I think that's an...
No, he's absolutely right. So we clapped, we gave our hands because he's right. Yeah. There's always a mixture between old traditional kind of fighting and modern one. Yeah. And not the one or the other, is a mixture.
Yeah. And equipment that is good, that has to be used. We're lucky that we have it on the front, and of course we will use both. And just, the issue is just we need more, you need more. That's the issue, not that one is better or the other is not.
Well, thank you so much for all the questions, and thank you to our amazing panel. I think before we close up, I think you want to give some closing remarks to your partner in this event.
Yes, it's not huge closing remarks, it's just thank you. Thank you, of course, in the first line for all the panelists.
First line of defense.
Yeah. Something like that was in my thought. So thanks for you, for this wonderful panel, for the discussion, for the insights. I think it's very, very important for us. And thanks, of course, to our moderator, Carrie. It was wonderful moderation, and you really got all the information out of us. Thanks a lot for that. I really like to thank again for, I don't know how many years we are already here, for the Literaturhaus, that they gave us such a wonderful place for our side event here. Thanks a lot for everybody here in the Literaturhaus. Thanks a lot for the team of the Reservistenverband. Reservistenverband. You making this possible with all your work. It's a lot of organization in advance, and it worked. Thank you very much. And in the end, thank you to you who are here in the audience, in the Literaturhaus, and everybody who's online. We have lots of questions left. Sorry for that, but it has to come to an end. I also have a lot of questions to our Ukraine comrades, learnings that we can have, but we must to come to an end. I hope you enjoyed the information, the discussion of our panel. I hope you will join us next year again. So now we have a reception here that is quite hard for the people who are just online. So I invite you to our reception here. And thank you, everybody, joining us tonight. Have a good night.